All right, there he is, Sir Andy Rouse. Welcome back, man. How's it going today?
Dude, not too bad, man. How's it been?
It's been great, dude. I know we both took a break from podcasting and much needed break to focus on stuff, but it's great to be back. And I know that it's going to be an exciting year for both of us. And for people who don't know, tell us about the Deep Share podcast. Tell us about what you've been up to. How have you been, man?
Sure. Sure. Yeah, man. Yeah, I didn't realize you took a break too. That's awesome, man. I mean, a lot of us I've heard that from recently. It's just this time of year, everybody
Absolutely.
needed to kind of be with family or do their thing.
Yeah.
Decompression is good. But yeah, the Deep Share podcast is coming back 1st of February, and I got some killer interviews coming up. And I think I'm going to switch the show up a little bit. Traditionally, it's been purely interview based. You know, I mean, obviously, I've had a lot of podcaster friends come on and
Mhm.
shoot the shit most of the time. That's honestly some of the most productive conversations right there,
Right
anyway.
on.
But yeah, consciousness, ancient history, all the mysteries. That's kind of my jam, always has been. And that's what it will continue to be, no matter what the show does. So yeah.
Awesome, man. Glad to have you back. And I want to quickly touch on that ancient history, especially how it propagates in our modern culture with things like Game of Thrones. I know you had
Ooh.
gone back to rewatch Game of Thrones at a certain point because last time that we spoke was sometime in the spring, maybe like early summer
Yeah.
2022. I know it's been a while, but did you end up going back to rewatch the entire series? And like what are some takeaways, some things that stuck out to you this second time around that maybe you have overlooked first time around?
So, well, the first time I watched the show, I mean, when you think about like season one, I don't even know what year that aired, but I probably watched it the same year it aired, and then
Mm,
it turned me on to the books, and then I went from there. But even though I was, I guess you could say, like psychedelically kind of awake back then, I was also like heavily repressing a lot of it because there was no good community around to like
mm,
have these kind of conversations. At least from where I was just mostly just reading dead guys in bookstores. So
mm.
a lot of it I just kind of like ignored, but psychedelically I was kind of awake to these kind of themes and everything. And wow, I forgot where I was going. It is early. What were we talking about again?
So I asked you about Game of Thrones, and it's kind of funny that you
Gotcha.
bring
Yeah.
up like a psychedelic perspective because
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
people get a little well, like if you consider like giants in the deep northern tundra, like that's a very psychedelic idea. Ancient
Mm.
civilization that has dragons, that's a very psychedelic idea because it's so far beyond what we see in this 3D here and now. What
Oh,
did
for
you think?
sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, being psychedelically awake and like starting to question everything, it's been years, and now going back like all these years later to um watch the first season. At least I didn't get through the whole series, but
Mhm.
the first season, um it was pretty wild to see all the connections, not only to like Tolkien's philosophies,
Mhm.
but then to allude to what Tolkien was talking about as well, this commonality of this kind of hidden history behind everything, and it all having to do with the North, and you know, how do you say, like basically like the old Germanic, European, Scandinavian folklore, things like that. Um, yeah, that's kind of what I got out of it just watching the first season. I couldn't do the whole thing.
Yeah,
I
oh,
couldn't.
that's
It had, honestly hadn't been long enough, I don't think. And I'm still kind of pissed that George R. R. Martin has put out like side quests and fucking
yeah.
produces all these new shows, but still hasn't, put out The Winds of Winter, which is the sixth book. So, it's kind of just rude. And I'll boycott it for now.
As Greta Thunberg might say, how dare you? But
How dare
I want to ask you something similar because you brought up some Germanic ideas, and there's been a lot of talk, especially from your show and from the people that you've been interacting with about the Box Saga, and it was really cool. You were the one to introduce me to that, and I got my copy of the Box Saga right down there, and I
you. Nice.
got to dig through. It's pretty cool. I've been loving this study of etymology, especially. But I want to ask you something else too, like in that same vein I really like looking back on the historical shift, and you could call it by many names. You could say the shift from pagan culture to Christian culture, or from the shift of nature and Pan from Christ and hierarchy. What do you
Mm-hmm.
think about those shifts, those cultural shifts, and how they're still playing out today?
I think there's a lot of different angles we could look at, or maybe different scales. One scale would be divide and conquer, because I do see this as kind of like it's like a philosophical difference
Mm,
in ideologies. And I think it's rooted from we're all from the same family. So I think at some point, the ruling class that kind of held pure order, perhaps, was broken apart at one point and kind of divided in a way. And I think it was an ideological divide originally, but it's probably turned into a million other things since then, of
mm,
course. But that's one way to look at it, like divide and conquer these two different ideologies. Another way would be um, kind of the analogy in like famous writings and stories like the prodigal son returning, the hero's adventure or hero's journey, as some know it as, from Joseph Campbell. The idea of the young person having a new idea and breaking away from the old idea, right? And he goes off into the world. He's mostly proven wrong over and over
mm.
again and eventually has to return home. But then it's like a convergence of the old and the new at that point. I don't know. It's alchemical in a way, where it's like we're in this world of opposites here in the physical material world. So we can't really avoid it. So I think there's a lot that say religion can give us, and there's a lot that the perennial philosophy or paganism, heathenism can give us. It honestly doesn't really matter on that scale, at least, which one came first or which was right or wrong. Like none of that. It's kind of like these are aspects of our consciousness that clearly have been addressed over and over again in a multitude of ways from different perspectives for thousands of years. So they're not fake or not illogical. They're part of it, regardless of what you think of one or the other. And that's, yeah.
That's pretty cool. That kind of takes us away from that tunnel vision that could be engineered by any particular culture. It's cool to recognize, the multifaceted aspects of not only the history of our culture, of our current culture, but also like the origins. Like you said, there's no need to argue which came first or what is the one true way. It's just we're seeing so many different like convergence, and it's really
Right.
interesting that you bring up uh, I want to say travel, because travel as the alchemical process. I know Terence McKenna would talk about, the inner travel is a quest to bring something back. You pull something back from that experience as
Right.
like a gift to the rest of your tribe, your world, your community. And I'm curious, after studying the Bach saga a lot and getting into different historical narratives, what is something that you feel like you brought back that helps in your own conception of reality, or in the way that you think about what's going on now? What do you think about all that?
I think the box saga gave me like not it wasn't something new, but it was like a flashback and a renewal of a feeling that
Mm,
I knew was legitimate. And of course it harkens back to psychedelic experience, where it's like something is so uncomplicated yet so complex, but so simple at the same time, and so straightforward and fits all the right criteria. That, not to say that like the box saga is 1,000% right, or it's never been messed with or whatever. It's just the some of the big ideas in box saga directly correlate or parallel that feeling of certainty, that
mm,
gnosis. And that's kind of allowed me to run with it a little bit here and there, enough to see where I can kind of suss out some of the bullshit behind some of the other areas of study. I
right.
get, I don't know, that's a little hard to explain, but I guess simplifying everything. And Occam's razor being a key thing, and it doesn't always work. Things are complex and things are complicated. What I kind of have put together from the Bach saga and history and folklore so far in my journey is extremely simplified, but really nuanced. And it takes a lot to explain sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's cool that you bring up gnosis because it's a very universal concept. You know, you could be working with ancient Sufi traditions to reach gnosis. You could be looking at Celtic folk tales, whatever it might be. It's just this path that converges on gnosis. And it's really cool to think about that. And before I like, there's a lot I want to ask you, Andy, but
Cool,
I
man.
just
Yeah.
gotta tell you that last night I fell asleep watching The Northman. I've never seen the entire movie. I got through like the intro, right? Have you
Mhm.
seen the entire film?
I have not seen any of it.
Okay. All right. So
So yeah, going in with
think
fresh eyes here.
you know, I've only seen the first 30 minutes. Just think like Lion King, like Simba loses his father and then he has to go out and avenge him and it's set
Mm,
up really cool. There's an interesting ritual in the beginning of the film that has to do with father and a son and they're going into this initiation. And if you ever watch it, I'd love to discuss it some other time. I'll probably go back and finish it later tonight.
yeah, I'll check it out.
Yeah, I feel like it'd be right up your alley. And other things that you've been posting on, because it's really cool that, you know, I appreciate, you know, we were kind of joking before we hit record that you may have taken a break from podcasting, but you have not taken a break from shit posting. And it's
Right.
yeah, it's not necessarily that you're posting shit. Like, let me be clear, like you're posting your shameless you know, unfiltered views on what's
Yeah.
happening or what you've been seeing. And it's cool that in the recent I don't know if you want to call it a zeitgeist in the
Yeah,
recent
it's a good word for it.
cultural narrative,
Mm,
Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock have taken center stage.
yeah.
Rightfully so, I think they've been putting forth
Yeah.
a lot of interesting ideas, but that's not to say I agree with everything or I can even prove what they're talking about. But what do you think about this ancient apocalypse and how it's kind of
Mm.
bashed into the narrative right now in this culture?
It's weird. It's a weird feeling, but I feel like we keep getting these weird feelings over and over again, and it reminds me of when I was younger, when suddenly like the metal bands that I was listening to were suddenly on MTV.
Mm,
And it wasn't because suddenly everybody was getting wise to how badass underground death metal was or something. No, it's because suddenly this band that I love didn't sound the same anymore. Right. That's usually how it went. And it's not that I'm not suggesting Graham or Randall or anyone in their field has like changed their views or anything like that's it's a not a direct comparison, but just the loose comparison that something's a little fishy when things are allowed to become extremely popular.
yeah.
And right now, everything alternative is extremely popular. We may feel like we're in like some little niche corner. It at least has to be debunked everywhere.
Mm,
It's no longer just for Skeptic magazine. It's everywhere. It's a topic whether it's for or against, it doesn't matter. And that's the essence of divide and conquer, controlled opposition. So what are they what so where my mind goes is what would they hypothetically be trying to tell us or want us to be constantly thinking about and paying our attention to
mm,
if this is if this is part of it, if our underground kind of underdog heroes now are getting the attention they've long deserved. Because I mean, I feel that way. I've loved these guys for a long
yeah.
time.
Yeah.
I knew Randall Carlson's name before I saw him on Joe Rogan because I was reading fucking Hancock's books and shit.
Right.
I
Yeah.
love these guys. But I also remember what Randall jumped on about the guide stones. And you don't even need to be all the way super tinfoil hat to look at the guide stones with a critical eye and go, well, what the fuck was this about?
Mm,
Okay, private citizen, yada, yada. Was it real? Oh, no, it wasn't just a private citizen. How about that? All these little connections. And it's like, what do you want to do with that? How do you escape that? And then you got people like Annie XT I'm not sure if you're familiar with that name, but he's another really, really smart guy, really adventurous guy. He's had a great YouTube channel for a long time, but he's one of these, you know, ancient mystery, or should I say suppressed ancient knowledge kind of headline people. And they kind of have defended the Guidestones when they got, attacked.
Hmm.
It was this big thing where it's just like expressing what we express all the time, but with no nuance. It's like suggesting that this is precious hidden history, and these people are trying to destroy it. It's like, no, 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 no. Like, whoa, wait a minute. And Annie XT directly compared the Guidestones to Giza and Baalbek and other ancient sites with the same, and he had to go back on that, of course, and say things like, well, no, I just meant with, like, regarding the same reverence and
Preservation, yeah.
mm. And Randall defended him, like, personally, like,
Mm.
went on record, felt it necessary. I mean, it was in a podcast, but it was still clipped and put everywhere
Yeah, right.
to defend this Guidestones. And you can't really look the other way, whether it's a real threat to humanity or one put there on purpose to scare the shit out of everyone on purpose.
Mm.
Either way, it's a psyop, and it's either way, it's a bad thing. And to defend it as if it's some piece of, important, yeah, I'm going off.
I love it. I love it. No, this is a really, I mean, especially when you
How do
bring
you
up the guide
reconcile,
stuff.
right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I agree. Like history should be preserved. Like when we saw statues coming down in 2020, I was like, this doesn't seem right. This seems like
Right.
the opposite of what we should do. But at the
Sure.
same time, I could see why, someone like Randall, he is one of those guys that he's been able to uncover or look critically at a historical narrative that most people are maybe too afraid to even look into, to even consider. And I guide stones aside, because that's a
Yes,
whole
that
nother
is I
podcast,
didn't
so
get to
yeah.
finish my whole take on them in
It's
general. I just
okay.
went off on the
It's
Guidestones
all
tear.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
But they're like, what I generally think of it coming out is that something is being told to us
Mhm.
regarding that, and I think it's being framed in a very frightening way. They're not the only ones. I've had a number of people on my show that have their books out, and the conclusion is that we're gonna get hit again. We're gonna get hit again. We're gonna get it, and it's like, well, we don't. I mean, there's a lot of theories around surrounding that shit, and there's, it's not just comet impacts or anything. It's a whole catastrophe, section of the library, you could
Yeah.
say. So I don't know. Is it being pushed on us because it's like a fear thing? Like, I don't know. I really don't know. Is it honest? And then again, I would like to note this, that in my opinion, controlled opposition has a lot more to do with subject matter than it does individuals.
Mm.
Not to say that, I mean, I know it's Randall behind the math, and I know it's these people behind these theories for the most part. But yeah, I don't know. It's a conundrum for me right now, because I tend to think that the truth lies more in ignoring everything that is being told to you about the world around you for the
Yeah.
most part. But I don't know. It's a constant Pandora's box.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many different ways that our attention can be drawn, like in so many different directions. And it's sometimes I think you're absolutely correct. We have to kind of forget everything or ignore everything and kind of like look for ourselves. And there's another kind of, this might be the perfect segue, because if we're thinking about ancient history, that also includes ancient folk tales and creatures, for lack of a better term. And I saw this cool video you posted from Bill Donahue. He talked about, we have to release this kindergarten mindset. He was talking about angels, how they're no one can be no one's going to be able to prove that they're entities with wings that fly around. The angel is within you. It's that voice, that Jiminy Cricket that guides you, that intuitive feeling. And it's cool that he brings up this kindergarten mindset, and that starts to put into question all these folk tales. I mean, they're all exciting stories, and they have really flavored historical narratives and cultural paradigms. but maybe we're approaching them the wrong way, and maybe our ideas of the supernatural aren't as mythical as we think. Maybe they're really just part of who we are. And I was wondering if you wanted to start to get into this idea that you shared with me a couple days ago about rehumanizing antiquity. And it seems like a really cool
Yeah.
concept. I know you're really excited to get into it. How would you like
Yeah,
to start?
sure. Yeah, yeah. And it's a really nuanced thing to talk about because at first it's going to sound like I'm ruling out or ridiculing even basically all spiritual experience in a way. And I'm absolutely not, because I've had those experiences myself and I've had to redefine everything myself as well.
Mm,
The only thing is, I've had a voice forever saying, keep questioning, keep questioning, keep questioning, because like everything has been so convenient for the past 15, 20 years of researching, at least from that perspective, from the psychedelic, what is reality, what is everything kind of perspective. It's been like 20 years of looking into every different category you can imagine and coming out the other side and still remaining in that Occam's razor mentality of
mm,
keep questioning, condensing, simplifying, not reducing, but simplifying,
yeah.
down to its primary form, everything I could find. And the Bach saga, again, gave me a big leg up with this, whether, again, if it's completely true or just hints at certain things. The Bach saga merely opened the door for me. What's more drawn attention to my studies is the Irish folklore, Scottish folklore, English folklore, all that, Germanic folklore in general. Um, it's kind of shown me that this is a spiritual and historical kind of thing that's happened to us. And whether it's entirely nefarious and intentional or only partially, and part of it's just natural game of telephone in a way, that could be.
Mm,
But what's happening is, it seems to me anyway, that who we are on a macro scale is our history. On a micro scale, it's who we are inside. That's our spirituality. We know that the powers that be, quote unquote, they always try to take our power from us and try to reduce it down and pretend it doesn't exist and it's somewhere else. So the way they do that is they keep us as orphans in the world through our history
mm,
while hijacking that history, not by necessarily throwing it away or setting it on fire and burning it into nothingness, but to literally use it as a way to harness our spirituality.
mm.
It's getting two birds stoned at once, man.
Yeah.
As I like to say,
Mm,
it's literally twisting real ancient history so we don't know our origins, but selling us on a fake origin through spirituality, which again is taken away from us and given away to other entities, when really what this comes down to is our framing of reality itself
mm.
and consciousness. A debate that we still have going on, of course, endlessly. But for those of us, I think some of us out there who have eyes to see in that direction, it's everything is consciousness. Everything, this is all part of consciousness. And so there is no outside, there is no inside, there is no other when it really comes down to it. And a lot of people say, well, I'm not talking about that scale. Well, you have to, because
Mm,
we're talking about spiritual teachings and spiritual books and things that literally affect the core of our being, not some flagrant fucking political scandal. This is
right.
the core of it all. So you have to talk about that scale, because they're literally taking the concept of unity away right now. They're trying to harness it into a digital utopia, right? They're trying to
Mm,
take those real concepts, plaster them further and further and further into the material understanding of reality, because that takes us, not that the material reality is not real, but it takes us further and further away from our source, further away from our true essence. And that's a lot to take in, I know.
Well said though. I mean the problems of the physical reality. Like I can give you an example. You've probably been seeing people jokingly, but also I mean some people are taking this very seriously. jokingly posting about how gas stoves are going to be banned and that people are like,
Right.
well, you can't take it from me, come and
Yeah,
get it.
take my
And it's,
stove.
yeah. And for the people who are worried about this, it's pushing them down into that fight or flight sort of operation of their nervous system. They're not able to think about the oceanic consciousness and our ancient
Right.
origins because they're so focused on just eating and surviving. And that's
Absolutely.
tragic, but it's a perfect example of, what pulls us away. And for people who want to do their own research and look into it themselves, could you I would love for you to clarify, because this is a really interesting story that I feel like, we're just getting started with. And if you could point to what do you consider to be kind of like the fake narrative that we've been given as far as history, and then like how do you see your personal perspective shifting to a different story or some other approach? Could you clarify that?
Sure. Currently, we have a lot of narratives popping up in alternative history and all. So you look at the entire UFO community as a part of this as well. They're kind of on the outskirts because we all look at them like you're just desperately listening to the government over and over again. But that's not the whole group of them, right? But everybody has, experiencers have their experiences, me included. I've seen shit in the sky and
Yeah.
I've had my weird, interactions in consciousness. Um, so we have mostly this narrative that it can be cut and dry as these interdimensional beings are coming in, or we have aliens from other planets coming in, or we have aliens that have, that landed here millions of years ago and they've been among us all along. But it's always alien, right? It always has to be other, always has to be other. Um, so that's a big problem. But we won't get into the problem yet. But so that's mainly the concern I have because we're upgrading our terms, nothing more, right? We're trading the old psyop for the new psyop. And that digs in even harder. It's a little easier to attack the UFO community than it is to attack the religious community. I'm not trying to attack anybody, but
Yeah.
all of the religious side of it is the same. We look at ancient history, they're trying to call it ancient aliens now, but it's just changing the vocabulary from one supernatural thing to another in a way. It's something that we're not able to prove. It's something otherworldly. It's something outside of our human experience. But either way, it's the same kind of thing. It's just an upgrade to contemporary terms.
Hmm.
In my opinion, a lot of the ancient spiritual knowledge that I've seen and read that resonates with conscious experiences is just the primitive version of what people say about simulation hypothesis,
Hmm.
right? I mean, these are just upgrades to our contemporary understanding. Regardless, to me, it's all psyop and it's pushed and allowed. I mean, when it comes to the way religion was pushed, especially westernized religion with gods and things like that, even the way they view and teach paganism as that they had pagan gods and that they worshiped gods. That's not true either.
Hmm.
But that's the way they framed even the ones they don't believe in anymore. So it's all part of the same structure being pushed. And now we see on the UFO side, it's being pushed hard and it is being drug out hard.
Hmm.
So, the report that was supposed to come out in October just dropped the other day, and it's a big nothing burger again, of
Just like
course.
last year.
That's all they're ever going to do. And they're begging the UFO community to stop relying on them, but they just keep begging for it,
Hmm.
because they want their little green men that we've been completely immersed in for 100 years of cinema and literature, you know,
Yeah, I
and
feel
it
like it's
all
safe to
takes.
say at this point it has become a new religion.
Oh yes, and it does go back to the 1800s. The UFO mythology, not the myth. I mean, I shouldn't say UFO mythology because I've seen UFOs.
Yeah.
I've absolutely seen the
The
government's
UFO
work in the
reality.
sky, or a breakaway civilization. We can get
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
my other theory that there
Mhm.
it could be something along those lines, but I do believe it's human.
Mhm.
But yeah, so that to me is the narrative that is out there right now, one way or the other. Either it's a religious thing, an interdimensional thing, or an alien thing. And man, the interdimensional one and the CE5 stuff really, really is a great way for them to corral a great group of people,
Mm.
right? It corrals a lot of people that think exactly like us and are us. Like I love a lot of the CE5 material throughout the years,
It's fascinating.
it's
Yeah.
got me into things, because it's always truth layered in bullshit.
Mm. There's always layers, my friend. There's always layers. And
But they have to put the truth there, otherwise we wouldn't be attracted to it.
yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a perfect example. Again, this is coming from me just looking at your Instagram, your
Sure.
Facebook, your posts, and it's convenient because it's playing into these multi-perspective, like these multifaceted perspectives. It could be something mystical, it could be something human, and we're trying to suss out the details within all these layers. And one was about the concept of elves and how when you look at elves and the history of Ireland, that maybe these weren't mystical creatures like we've been led to believe, even though it's fascinating and interesting. And I love the elves in Lord of the Rings. They're like my favorite. But
Mm-hmm.
really, this was more of like a historical term for conquest or for invasion. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Well, the term elf or elven, specifically elven, if you follow the etymology, literally just means white.
Mm-hmm.
And that pops up over and over and over again. What I meant by maybe invasion or conquest, more like just describing the people who did those things,
Yeah.
um, from the northern regions. Um, and this is stuff I'm putting together after interviewing a bunch of different authors who have had their niches and they've explored those niches relentlessly, And the one that has hit home with me the most is Ireland and Scotland. This is where, my heritage is. And yeah, looking into folklore, and keep in mind my first mushroom experience, I literally felt like I was in one of those psychedelic gnome friggin' mushroom posters that you'd find at like Hot Topic 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Like I was immersed in that world. So I understand all of it and I'm not taking it away from it from anyone or trying to. But we have to separate our experiences from the language that we're given to describe our experiences. And this actually was a shift in the 1800s. A man named McDonald, I can't remember his first name. I could pull it up, but he was like a predecessor of Lewis Carroll,
Mm.
and he basically was the first author, at least popularly, to use the term portal or porthole
Yeah. Yeah.
to describe a doorway to a magical place. Before then, there is no use of that term being used in a mystical way,
Mm.
other than metaphorically, and the metaphor is on its nose. It's like right there. It's on purpose. It's obvious. So we can expand on that by saying that most of the writing of Irish and Scottish and English folklore in the 1800s was starting to gear it towards that direction, into the fairy lands and things like that, and all these mystical experiences, mixing it with another thing that was a coming of age thing, which was psychedelic popularization.
Mm.
This happened in the 1800s. We knew that this was going on. Like Wasson was late to the game. Like in the 50s, man. Like the 1800s, we knew that we were interacting with all these tribes. Everyone knew that these practices were going on. So these narratives were coming together.
Mm.
This psychedelic narrative where a lot of convenient spiritual experience comes from, and the history that was there that wasn't supposed to be there. Because in the 1700s and before that, you can look back at historians with primary sources, and they all consider it was popular understanding that most of Irish folklore was kind of a declaration of how the Erie began,
Mm.
and what the tribes were like back then. That these were descriptions of real people, that we have the story of the Tuatha De Danann coming to Ireland, the Irish shores, in flaming ships in the sky. And of course, people run wild with that. And that's a similar story to a number of other cases.
Mm.
But the reality is that these traveling people would burn some of their ships to discourage cowards from turning away from battle. Because when they were there for good. They were setting up shop.
Fully
They'd make
committed.
other ships
Yeah.
years later, if they were
Mhm.
going elsewhere. They had massive fleets. These are the seat people that everyone keeps alluding to that we don't quite put our finger on.
Mhm.
But we can go everywhere with this. I mean, bring on some more. Yeah. This is
That's
my
the
favorite
exciting part,
topic.
man. That's the exciting part. Yeah, because I mean, one thread of historical narrative can be picked apart and looked at in so many different angles, and then you can realize that the same methodology, the same perspective that you can take on, was it mystical, was it another metaphor for reality, and the portal, the porthole was really interesting because I'm sure most people may have thought of Narnia in that same way, like, and I'll
Yep.
put that aside for a second because I want to go to a completely different side of this
Sure.
globe or this plane or whatever. I say
This
that
realm.
unironically. Yeah, this realm, perhaps the most mysterious area of this entire place is Antarctica, and I saw you post about Midjourney, and people know that this is the AI image generator, and that's fun to talk about. But I saw that perhaps these were, I don't know if they were actually images from that website, from that program, or I don't know where they came from. Maybe you can fill me in. But I was seeing pyramids, statues, structures in supposedly the Antarctic region, and I would love for you to unpack this for me because this is one of my favorite topics that I think it's the most mysterious. I think it's hard to really grasp for myself.
Well, this is a really interesting one because it leads me into all sorts of different places, and it includes controlled opposition and this narrative that we're talking about, of course. And it also does leave some questions about Box Saga,
Mm,
and not just Box Saga, but the North in general, and this old pagan history that has been expunged from history. Um, because of course Antarctica is our southernmost point, and they love to rub inversion in our face.
mm,
Just like the Box Saga describes hell as this place in the north, which I mean the term even means completion, home, heaven.
mm.
Yet what do we do with it? And of course it's a frozen place basically up in the north,
Totally
yet
upside
it's
down. Yeah.
yeah, it's all inverted. So it's interesting when we get all these stories about Antarctica. Not to branch off too far from Midjourney, but just to give another clarification about Antarctica, this whole something popped up recently with Admiral Byrd and high jump. And high jump's fascinating when it comes to whatever the fuck the Nazis were doing. The Aryans, them white people. So keep that in mind when we're thinking Box Saga. Um, yeah, it's really interesting the actual information about high jump and what happened down there. And it was probably a big fucking war mission with the Nazis and everything. But when it comes to his secret journal that his son supposedly released and everything, the flight, all the flight information, every log matches identically to the public facing high jump logs that
Mm,
have to be reported, right?
mm,
Even engine problems at the same exact times, all these time signatures line up. So right there, that's extremely suspicious,
mm,
right? On top of that, the description of the flight and where they are in this secret journal is about the North Pole. It's not about Antarctica. Yet high jump takes place in Antarctica, and that's where this journal is supposedly taking place to everybody that's talking about it. So that is a really interesting case. First of all, if it's all fake and it's not about high jump and it has nothing to do with Admiral Byrd and it wasn't real and there was no inner earth shit, why that particular narrative? Why Aryans underground? Why is this always the narrative? It's always right back to what we're talking about in folklore, all the way over to the Persian Gulf with the Anunnaki or the Tuatha De Anu in Armenia, which
mm.
connects the Ireland story to the
Right.
Anunnaki story. These are all white travelers with blue eyes, red blonde hair. It's it's too much, man.
Well, let's circle back really quick. How does one
Yes.
discover for themselves that Operation High Jump was actually going to the North Pole and not the South Pole. How does one come to
Wait,
that conclusion?
no. So high jump was Antarctica, and the
Okay.
all the official documentation and everything that happened,
Yeah.
even the suspicious parts that they're not saying anything, but we all think Nazis.
But the
All of
flight,
that is public facing knowledge, the
yeah.
flight logs, everything. But this journal, this secret diary
That's it. Yeah.
that everyone associates with high jump and Antarctica, because that's the convenient thing, right? It was like 30 days later the Antarctic Treaty was signed when this
Mhm.
diary hit the shelves and started making tons of money, asterisk. That journal was talking about north. It was the
Mm.
north, it was the Arctic zone.
Got you. Got you. Okay.
So so one, this is proving to someone out there, look at these people, they're just associating with Antarctica because we've led them into Antarctica as this big secret, which it still can be, obviously, but not the secret about Aryans and all this proto Ariana philosophy and stuff like that.
Mm.
That comes out of the North, and it's interesting that that narrative is put out there, even though we took it the wrong way. It's interesting that it's just there.
Hmm. I want to hear you speak about
Oh,
Midjourney,
back to
but
Mid Journey.
really
My bad.
quick though, really quick. I just have to get this out there because I didn't plan on. Well, this idea just came to me while you were
Sure.
speaking, but there's etymological similarity. Lucifer and Ahriman and Arian, and I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on that particular thread. Ahriman, Arian.
Most of any words that have to do with satanic, satanism, Luciferian, like you're going to find this in the old heathen pagan language, regardless. It's always going to be there. As how we frame it, whether we trust the Catholic Church in our contemporary conspiracy theory minds or not, we tend to believe them wholeheartedly when it comes to paganism and heathenism because of what the elites put out there, right? That's kind of what I got to say
Oh
on
yeah,
that.
no, absolutely. It's like when will we learn? Yeah.
Well, think about it. The sensitive issue out there that we
Mhm.
won't really get into, um, everybody ends up, or not everybody, but some people end up blaming a certain group, and then
Right.
they are just done. They're
Yeah.
just completely shut off, and
Yep.
oh, there's all the evidence and everything.
Mm.
But it's kind of similar. It's like you
Yeah.
start talking about it, and it's like I don't know. It's too complicated really to get
Yeah.
into.
Lots of speculation, but tons of fun nevertheless.
But
So
anyway, Mid Journey,
yeah, artificial intelligence generating images. It's
yes,
something that's fairly new in our access to it is fairly new. I'm sure it's been around for quite a
it's
while.
probably
What
been
do you
around
think?
for a
Yeah.
while. Well, some people would say it's been around for like decades and they've been doing it to us forever and everybody's fake out there and everything we see on film. And I won't go that far, but
Mm.
I will say that they're absolutely, it may not be they. I mean, I don't know anybody from my own life that's that much of a narcissist, horrible human being that they would purposely put out fake images. Oh, what am I saying? People are assholes. So whether it's they or just some random douchebag using mid journey,
Mhm.
a lot of these images of Antarctica that came out about what was it? I can't remember his name. It was it Kelly. I can't. I'll pull it up, but it's this actual journey that took place, this expedition that took place to Antarctica in like 1908, and there's hundreds and hundreds of pictures of that experience. It shows melted areas, it shows mountains, everything you can imagine that people would say they're hiding from us down there. But what it does not show, and it's completely different resolution and image quality, are pyramids and mass ancient grave sites and monuments and things like that, and random you know uh faceless researchers looking at said things. And that's the thing. AI, especially these mid journey type art generators, they have a real hard time with human faces. They're getting
Mhm.
a lot better at it, but when it comes to random generation, when they're putting things together, it seems like they have a real problem with it. and things get misplaced. And if you're not looking close enough, you might miss it. But if you look close, it's like, wait, structurally, that would fall down, like that doesn't, none of this makes sense, like
Mm.
it's fake, it's thrown together by something that does not know the background from the foreground,
Mm.
still, in my opinion, to some degree at least. But some of those images were actually found on Midjourney's like advertising front page. They're not there anymore, but they
Interesting.
were up for a while, of what you can do to manipulate black and white and this and that. And so when I started seeing these pop up, I'm like, this is the telltale sign. They did it with Roswell just a few weeks earlier.
Mm.
And it's like, one of these crash site pictures has a UFO floating above people, like in the picture. What the fuck is going on here? Like, so it's just so obvious that this is fake. And I've just taken it upon my asshole self to start calling out random accounts that are way bigger than me, that are pushing this shit over and over and over again. And not to say that they're horrible people, but wake up, pay
Yeah, yeah.
attention. You can't stand for paying attention and doing the research when you're not paying attention and not doing the research, and just posting everything for the grift.
Mm.
I mean,
Yeah,
and that happens more than everything. Or, they're fucking hawking chalk pills or something,
yeah,
like the
right,
body
right, right.
can't heal itself.
Oh God, yeah, that's another fun rabbit hole. I just
Shots
spoke to
fired.
Deplorable Janet about that. Yeah, it's like they'll try to sell you anything just to, push you to forget about how powerful you are, how
Exactly.
how capable you are, just in your own physical body. And it's interesting too because part of some people do podcast shows or write books for a number of different reasons, and it's cool that you can consider who you're speaking to or like who you hope to reach out to. And it's fascinating because sometimes I just do this show because I like to talk about these things, and there's other people who like to talk about them. Whoever wants to listen, it's great. But it's also interesting to consider that if you're looking carefully and you're being intelligently selective about what you promote, what you put forth, you could be helping people who don't know any better to not be led astray, and that you're really if you're gonna challenge or call out people who are maybe putting people on the wrong path, then I think you're doing a good thing by speaking out and being like, hey, this is a cool idea, but I wouldn't fully accept it as gospel. Here's another way to look at something, and it's
Yeah.
cool. You
And I'm
can kind
trying to
of,
be very nice about it.
you are,
And
yeah.
but
Oh.
for the most part, I'm trying to. But in some cases, it's frustrating when I kind of get responded to as if I'm talking to some normie friend who's denied everything, like everybody has the past few years, right?
Mm.
That really frustrating conversation that you end up having with people.
Oh yeah.
It happens to me in this community a lot because I point things out. It's like, stop ruining it. It's like, stop ruining what? Like, what? It's almost as if we were hoping, and it's a good hope, it's a good intention. We hope and we wish that we were all in this big cohesive group that understood. I think for the most part, where it really counts, and I said this the other day to my buddy Drew, that we, at our core, I think in this big broad podcasting community itself, it's kind of already an fu to the mainstream. It's already a, we're going to do this ourselves, we don't need a
Mm.
boss kind of attitude. And
Decentralized.
that's a good start anyway, but I'd say that's where it ends,
Mm.
um and it's hard because I think a lot of people have held on to that, like this is their saving grace, this
Mm.
community, me included in a lot of ways. um we're not all going to see eye to eye, but the more, again, the more we continue to question and not collapse on any conclusions, because I feel like the answers are in uh whatever's behind the next little nugget of information. It's
Mm.
not the piece of information itself,
It's a
if
trail
that
of
makes any
breadcrumbs.
sense.
Yeah,
Always a
yeah.
trail of breadcrumbs, but it's kind of in how all the I was trying to make an analogy out of it. Whatever. It's how the breadcrumbs make you feel.
Well, speaking of bread, dude, I mean, like the word companion is like those who you share bread with, like
Yeah.
pan, and it's cool because the friends that I've been making in the podcast world, um, they've been people who are, you know, what I want to say is that it's this kind of community that invites discussion, debate, usually friendly debate. You know, I've seen it
Yes.
go out of hand, which is fine. That's
99% of the time it's amazing and it's open.
99%. Yeah. And, you know, I don't want to sound too ironic saying this, but it's something that just popped in. And whenever you have these ideas, just share them. If that's anything I've ever learned,
Yeah.
if I listen back to this episode like 45 years from now, I'll be like, yep, I'm glad I just said what was on my mind. So I think what we've been doing, and you know what a lot of people have been doing with these stories, with these rabbit holes, if you will, is that they're making conspiracy fun again. And that's what I want to like stick to. At the same time, though, whenever we have, like, I know in a couple days, the World Economic Forum is going to be meeting, and Russell Brand did a really good video about the WEF is like the WWE, and it's like they're having like a SmackDown versus Raw, and it
Yeah,
also
they all
really,
want us to fucking pay attention to it.
yeah, exactly. They're putting on this like wrestling match for us. But you know, all that aside, Andy, what do you think as we wrap up? What is the best case scenario? Because some of the things that we've talked about, we haven't said it yet, but we're implying that there's some kind of process of disclosure, perhaps. And
Mm.
what do you see being the best case scenario if things continue in the way that you would like them to go?
Oh, then if it continues the way it will go, that I want it to go, then we, the people, will be bringing disclosure to the government,
Mm,
and it won't be what they want us to think it is. That's kind of the overarching thing for me.
that's a good way
We're
to put
gonna
it.
it's kind of a race to the finish line, but it's either that or they're never going to come out with it with anything. You know, everybody yells Project Bluebeam or this or that, and there's some interesting theories behind those
Mm,
scenarios, but at the same time it's like this nothing burger repetitive release is kind of doing the trick already
mm,
for whatever they're trying to do. It's just roping in more and more people having this very subverted trust in the government all over again.
mm,
You know, it's like a very large popular contingency of free thinking, quote unquote, critical thinking people that got re-swept into the norm almost because they just hang with bated breath and wait for the Pentagon's next word on anything. You know, while we are all having podcasts and interviewing people that are getting discredited, they're desperately trying to get narrative officials on their shows. And I think to some degree that's cool if you're going to ask some hard questions. But if you don't, and you're just going to kind of be letting them run the story that they keep running on headline news,
mm.
then what's the point?
Can't be afraid to challenge what's happening. You can still be friendly, but you got to challenge what you're
To
hearing,
a
what you're
certain
seeing
extent.
to a
Yeah,
certain
man.
extent. Yeah. Well, man, this has been fantastic. And before I let you go, you know, I saw you got a new logo for the Deep Share podcast. It kind of looks like this Russian doll sort of design. It's really cool.
Yeah.
You want to tell us about what's coming up in 2023, and maybe if you want to share the thought process behind this new logo, we'd love to hear about that.
Oh, the logo was basically the idea that I've had since I started this podcast with a few people, constant conversations about fractal reality.
Mm,
And the Russian doll has always been one of my favorite metaphors for that. So I kind of just took different, you know, big points of my personality, I guess, and tried to make different Russian dolls out of it. But I had some help with it too. So
nice.
yeah, that was cool. 2023, man, I'm just going to be trying to put out more conversations, more ranting as well. Um, because I love doing the interviews and I try to always have people on that say things, whether they're other podcasters or authors or filmmakers or whatever, whoever it is, it's people that I really appreciate listening to and they give me a new perspective.
Mm,
But a lot of times after I've gotten a lot of that, I I need to honor the idea that I need to like throw it all out of me and like
yeah.
see how it processed in my head and
Mm.
see how it comes back out
Helps
of
you
me
organize it all.
back to the collective, right?
Mm,
And instead of honoring that, I'll just, you know, keep pushing on with more and more interviews,
mm,
and eventually I kind of get burnt out and I, you know, I don't appreciate who I'm having on when I should, or I desperately want to just say, can you talk for an hour? And I'll get some questions along the way.
Yeah,
I get this laziness. And so, yeah, I want to make sure to keep that balance this year and put out some great interviews, and also just have my wife sit in with me and like pose a question to me and
oh,
let me
cool.
just go berserk for an hour off
Yeah,
that one topic. I think that might be fun. Whether
yeah.
it comes off great or ridiculous, I think it'll be fun regardless. So yeah, that's what I got going on, man.
Awesome, man. I'm happy for you. I'm happy that you're back in the podcasting game, and it's been really fun as always. I appreciate you coming back on Local
Likewise, man.
Listens, and
Always a
hope
good time.
yeah, man, it's gonna be an awesome year, and hoping for the best with quote unquote disclosure. Whatever happens, all we can
Whatever
say is
happens.
that it's whatever we bring forth that will be what matters in the end. So I appreciate you, man, and I hope you have a
Appreciate
fantastic day.
you too, man. Thank you again for having me on. It's always a good time. You're a
All
great
right.
thinker. You're a great interviewer. Appreciate your questions, man. I appreciate your mind. You're always thinking. So keep doing what you're doing, man.
Thanks, man. Likewise, likewise. Adios.
Peace out.